We'll go on to House Bill 9. Representative Landry.
Yeah,
Ms.
thank you.
Yep, Ms. Smith, if you would please read in the bill.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill number 9 by Mandie Landry. Wait, is this wrong? No. It allows registered voters to utilize voting by mail.
Representative Landry, on your bill.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Some of you heard this in 2020, but we have some newer people. This is better called expansion of absentee voting. Right now, we have several populations who vote by mail. The disabled, people over 65, people who are in the military, anyone who's going to be out of town, college students out of town, they all get a mail ballot that they return to us. I believe they each have a barcode on their ballot. Is that right? Envelope. Okay. So they have an envelope, and we are one of just a few states that does require the signature of a witness in addition to the voter. So we've had this for a while now. And what this would do, which would get us in line with 28 other states, is to expand the reasons that you ask for an absentee ballot, which would mean no reasons that anyone could request it. This is shown to greatly increase voter participation. It addresses issues such as emergencies, transportation issues, childcare, having to work at the last minute, having to go out of town at the last minute. It's one of the better, easier ways to promote greater voter participation. I want to say something real quick that's interesting from a political perspective. Donald Trump voted for himself by mail in 16. I'm not sure if he did it in 2020. And he now supports absentee voting and voter by mail. In fact, the Republican National Committee supports this now. They have a whole website called Bank Your Vote that their, what's her name, Rona something, who used to head the committee, is strongly pushing, because Democrats have done that for a while for a variety of reasons. So there's political issues that have changed. Also, among the 28 states, Georgia and South Dakota are two of them. So this is something that is growing nationwide. Some suggestions to do it here are to do a pilot program in one parish, two parishes. I know there are concerns with money, as there was last time, because this does require an initial investment of around $1 million to get more machines, just to get people ready for it, essentially, in the state. But other states show longer term that once this is in the system, that it ends up costing less to run elections, because you don't need as many people or as many machines. I know there's also a lot of, in my view, propaganda about voter fraud around the country. And you know what? We have had so few problems in this state. Our entire legislature and all statewide candidates who are not from my party were just, the supermajority here, were just elected by, we just had an election here with minimal voter fraud. Donald Trump had 58% and then 59%. Or vice versa. I forget, in the last two elections that our state elected him to receive our electoral votes. So this is something that, if anything, is not hugely popular for the party I'm a part of. It's actually the most popular for white voters over 65 years old, to no surprise. Black voters tend to vote by mail a little bit less because of trust issues, which is understandable. Voters greatly supported, especially after COVID. Our 65 and plus population can request a mail ballot indefinitely if you want to, and that went through the roof after COVID. My own mother did that. She said, "You mean I can do this on every election?" I said, "You sure can." Let me see if I have a few more things. Nope, I think I covered everything by memory. It's safe. It's low levels of fraud. It ends up being cheaper. It increases voter participation, and it seems like Republicans really like it now. I was shocked when I found that website. It's a whole website you can sign up for. I mean, I think the reasoning is political, which is, I'm fine with it. So if anyone has any questions, I'm also willing to
We have a
vote or
couple.
table.
We have just a couple. Representative Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd actually like to ask questions of Secretary Landry and Ms. Hadsky.
Thank you, Representative Thomas.
My question revolves around both the expense and the timing of counting the ballots. I believe that the fiscal note that I saw was directed at expenses that your office would incur. Is that correct?
I haven't seen the fiscal note on this, but Commissioner Hatsky, we had a similar bill. It was the same bill a few years ago or last year, and so Commissioner Hatsky can speak to the fiscal note that was on that one.
To do this for statewide would be about 12 million, approximately 12 million.
Okay.
Not on the fiscal note.
That was for all of the equipment, the ballots, the supplies, the centralized counting system if we gave every voter in the state a mail ballot.
Okay, and
Okay,
would
All right, I'll say back.
Yes,
Okay. would the registrars of voters and or the clerks of court have additional expenses as well?
Your parish board to tabulate this, the additional days to tabulate the mail ballots. So that would be an additional elections expense.
Okay, so right now, we know the results of elections on the day that the election is held.
That's correct.
And many of those ballots are mail-in ballots, and the ballots are processed by people from your office. Am I still correct?
That's correct.
So if there were an increase even of let's say, twofold of mail-in ballots, would we still be able to meet those deadlines, or would it be difficult?
It would be difficult. Currently, we have preparation and verification that the legislature passed in order to give a few days. However, we can't back that up more days because the deadline to request a ballot is 4 days prior, and we wouldn't be able to process them correctly. So it would take us after the election to finish tabulation on that. And it's also 4 days prior to challenge any voter.
Okay. That gives me pause of having continuing to have efficient elections and elections that are non-challengeable, if that's a word, and that we would probably not know results at the end of the evening on election night. Would you say that's a fair assumption?
Yes, if you add absentee by mail, that we could not finalize everything on election night.
Okay, one last question. About what percent of the voters or people who vote by mail, what percent is that in Louisiana?
So currently, we previous to COVID, we only had approximately 40,000 to 60,000, and today we're upward.
Well, that's not percent.
No, that's the total numbers.
Total number, okay.
Yeah, today we're upward of 170 to 200,000. One of our staff members could give us the percentage, I believe. Oh, thank you. Percentage would be 2016 presidential was 3.1% of all voters. 2023 gubernatorial was 8% of all voters. So it depends on the election.
Okay, so it's less than 10%.
Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Representative Landry, for allowing me to ask them questions.
Do you want me to respond to some of it now or at the end? Okay. This bill does not say that ballots should go to 100% of people at all. It's the same bill as last time. That bill didn't say that at all. There are 7 or 8 states that do that, and that's the only way they vote. So the 12 million is not a number that is real. First of all, it says in here in the fiscal note that the estimate is it would go up. The number of about 175 it has here would go up by 50%, which only gets us to 235 voters. Maybe it would be a little higher. The estimate also in extra supplies, postage, envelopes, whatever, it's around 500,000. In terms of needing more people to count that night, of course, we would need more people to count that night, but you would also need fewer people to monitor the polls and do election day activities, I guess I would say. Also, as far as deadlines, we can change those things. Other states do it. We can require them to be turned in by that date. I mean, these are things that we can absolutely deal with. Some states don't do that. Some states, they give them more time. We actually do give our military voters more time to retain their, but it's such a small number that, well, actually, we just had an election in Shreveport that those ballots would have made a difference. So that is something to think about, to require them to come in earlier, and we can always look at what other states do. Like I said, more than half of states do this. This is an administrative function we can deal with, and I think our numbers went up, about 50,000 people since COVID, something like that? New registered voters?
New registered or new by mail?
That's what I mean, sorry,
New
by mail.
Okay, so it went from approximately 40 to 60,000 to currently more around 170 to 200,000.
It went up, okay, I thought it was less than that it went up by, okay. Sorry, that's
no,
the one
that's
thing I
okay.
didn't know, yeah. Because I know, I was telling them the over 65 went up significantly.
Yes.
And that was the big increase,
Yes.
I think, okay.
So did the population over 65.
Over
Increase.
65,
Yes, the population of people over 65
who live here?
who live here
Oh, I didn't
increased as well.
I didn't know that. But baby boomers, they're booming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, Representative Thomas?
No, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Polly.
Representative Newell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Might as
I
well
was
say.
expecting the
Most
Vice
honorable.
Chair to be up there, not the Speaker
He'll
Pro
be back.
Tem. Yeah, he right there. I just have a question because I need clarity. So the Ms. Haskell, you said this. I think you said it that it would increase to $12 million.
If everyone in the state received a mail ballot, I would need to know how many people. We can't just leave it open-ended. What if a random number decided to?
But when you said the 12 million, you
Yes.
said that included equipment.
It does.
That equipment would not need to be purchased every year.
That's correct. So there would be an annual incurring expense and a initial expense.
The initial expense. So because I'm just asking these questions because the way you made the statement, it seemed as though this 12 million would be recurring
No.
every year. So I just wanted to make that clear that this would be an initial 12 million and then the cost could decrease after purchasing that additional equipment needed for this.
That's correct.
Right, okay, thank you. And with the bill, is not allowing for everyone just to automatically get an absentee ballot. This is just taking off the parameters of the criteria that we have on people now for them to request an absentee ballot. So, for instance, myself, if I just feel I don't want to go to the poll that day, but I want to vote, I don't have to fall within these 8 categories in order to get an absentee ballot and then face some type of legal ramifications later. I, as Joe citizen, could just ask for an absentee ballot, whatever my reasons, correct?
Yeah.
So we're not looking at sending every registered voter in Louisiana an absentee ballot.
Correct.
Thank you.
So there are a few states who do that, but I was not proposing that. And quick clarification on the money. This says this is the fiscal office, so y'all might not have discussed with them, around $1 million initial investment, and then about $500,000 if we use the 50%, which other states tend to use, and we could raise that estimate, about $500,000 for paperwork and postage, and then whatever they need for staff those years. I mean, I'd be interested in exploring sending it to everyone, but I know that won't happen.
No, not here. Yes, I was reading that it did say that there was a one-time cost of $1 million and then $1.5 million annually. And that would be in opposed to this first bill we looked at that was looking at $13 to $17 million a year. If we're willing, if y'all willing to pay commissioners more to encourage more people to come and work, if we fronted this cost to open up absentee ballots, would that kind of eliminate the need to have more poll workers if we're going to be anticipating less people going to the polls?
And we have concerns as well with, currently with USPS. We have been struggling severely with USPS. We have a USPS representative that I work with, and the registrars and clerks can tell you about the ballots that are coming in postmarked 2 weeks prior to the election, but coming in after the election, things like that. And so there's concern with USPS right now.
So commissioners have to count and open and sort and scan.
correct.
And verify the signatures and do all of that. So it still requires commissioners, and it takes a lot longer.
But would
So
you
it'd be
need
a lot
those
longer
commissioners, like the ones that's at my neighborhood poll, would that number increase there? So you might have to hire, and they do this at your office, this counting?
No.
No.
The Parish
It's a
Board of Election Supervisors.
But is that a
Election day.
centralized location? Because it
Each
seems like I
parish.
need this.
No, it's in each parish. Each parish has a bipartisan Parish Board of Election Supervisors that oversees and is responsible for counting.
Okay, so
absentee
they
ballots.
have a set of people that's at their office that does this, correct?
That's correct.
And just let's pick on Orleans Parish because that's where I'm from. How many people do y'all normally have there, if you know?
For parish board commissioners?
Yeah, that does these, that
It
counts
depends,
these
right,
mail-in
it depends on the
ballots.
size of the election. So we've had up to, for a presidential, you've got your parish board staff and 20 parish board commissioners and Secretary of State support staff. But the number of commissioners at a polling location is set by the type of election. If it's a proposition election, it's 3 commissioners, 1 commissioner in charge. If it's a candidate election, it's 4 commissioners and 1 commissioner in charge. So the number of voters, unless it drops under 300 registered voters, remains at that allotment.
Okay. Yeah, seems like I need to do this little field trip so I could better understand this. However,
love to have you.
I would, thank you. I just want to put it out there again that Louisiana is top in a good way.
In a good way.
In a
we're-
good
we're-
way this time, because as we've discussed the last 4 years, and your predecessor was, of course, the secretary at the time, but you were there seeing the process through as well, and I'm confident that you're going to keep that office running the way it has been to make sure that Louisiana stays in the top 10 and hopefully number 1
We want to go to
as
number
far
1.
as voting integrity.
Absolutely. We want to be number
Even
1.
when we opened the list, which we did during COVID, we took some of the restrictions away for people who could request a ballot. They weren't limited to this list. And we did not have any issues with any type of voter fraud. We didn't have any issues with people voting too many times. We didn't have issues with dead people voting. We had a solid election that you put your name behind. And clearly you was okay with it because you ran to run the office now. So I just want to put that out there because I don't want people to get confused. Like the integrity of that office is somehow going to fall by the wayside by opening it up to give more people access to vote by mail. And I want my ultra conservative, fiscally conservative colleagues, not the ones in this room, but I want everybody to look at spending, not just the ones in this room. I want everybody to look at spending the same, no matter if you agree with the issue or not. If you want to save money, you want to save money, and it doesn't matter what the issue is. If you don't agree with the issue and you're trying to save money, okay. If you agree with the issue and you're trying to save money, okay, save money. But don't do it at the expense of trampling over and taking somebody's rights to access to voting or any access away. But I just needed those points of clarity. Thank you, Representative Landry, Secretary Landry, and
The Landry
Ms.
Caucus.
Yep.
and Ms. Haskell. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you, Mr. Pro.
real
Tem.
quick, I am personally aware of issues with the mail service and elections. I actually had someone approach me about an issue and we worked through it. That's a problem now. And I don't know what to do with that now. Expanding it would, increase the number, but I don't know how to solve that, but it is something we have to address already because as we saw this time, there are close elections, and just because a ballot isn't returned doesn't mean that the voter didn't drop it in the mail. So I don't know how we can fix that already. Maybe that's another bill later.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I also put in a white card to speak too, and I would
Yes,
answer
ma'am.
questions, but
I
I'd
got,
still
still
like to
have some more
speak, too.
questions,
Thank
but
you.
we'll get to you. And is that all, Most Honorable State Representative Newell?
I did say thank you for your time.
I'm
Mr. Pro
asking,
Tem.
I wanted, did you have any? I'm always intrigued, so I wanted to know if you
I
had any.
appreciate it. I'm
Okay.
finished.
Thank you. Representative Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Pro Tem, and thank you, Representative Landry, for being here. Appreciate it. So to be clear, I wanted to make sure that what we're talking about here is a ballot that somebody requests. They don't have to request it just the one time, but at every election.
I should check with Trish. I think this for under 65 and non-disabled or military people, they do have to request it every time.
Right.
And that's what this bill says. So the onus is still on them to actually request it if they are not over 65 or not disabled or fit another category.
There was some crosstalk and confusion, so good.
Sure,
That's what I'm
thank
looking
you.
for, is it's over 65, they only have to request it once, and it comes automatically, but this one has to be requested for
Every time. It just removes the reason. You don't have to say you're going to be on vacation or you're in college or whatever the reason may be. Because like I said, things pop up.
Thank you, Representative Landry.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank Clear, but I'd like to call up our Secretary of State, Nancy Landry, who has also given us a card to speak. Thank you, Ms. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. There's no evidence that vote by mail significantly expands participation in federal elections. Moreover, it raises concerns about privacy, as citizens voting at home may come under pressure to vote for certain candidates, and it increases the risk of fraud. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem and members, these are not my words, but the words of President Jimmy Carter and Secretary James Baker in their 2005 report on the Commission of Federal Election Reform. Although much has changed since 2005, this truth has not. In-person voting is the safest, most reliable method of voting. When a voter votes in person, we can be sure that their vote is counted, regardless of any postal issues that may arise. When a voter votes in person, they can be sure that any question or concern that they may have can be answered or alleviated by one of our commissioners right away. An individual voting in person is prevented from overvoting or voting for more candidates than allowed by our election equipment. An absentee voter does not have a physical warning or prevention method to prevent such a mistake. When a voter votes in person, we can be sure that they are the individual doing the voting because of our voter ID laws. While we have an absentee voting program in Louisiana, it is limited in scope and has a number of safeguards in place to ensure that our elections remain safe and secure. Furthermore, Louisiana voters prefer to vote in person. In 2020, even when we temporarily expanded our absentee voting program to include 5 COVID-related excuses, 93% of those who voted did so in person. In fact, in that election, over 2 million voters voted in person, the most ever in the history of Louisiana elections. Members, these are the facts. Voters who vote by mail run the risk of having their ballot delivered to them or returned to the registrar of voters past the deadlines, meaning the voter either cannot vote absentee or their vote comes in too late to count. A November 2020 article in the Washington Post stated that 7% of ballots were not processed in time for submission to election officials. And for comparison purposes, 10 states accounting for 161 electoral votes in the 2020 election came down to a margin of less than 7% between the two major party candidates. Our own state has faced a number of issues with the U.S. Postal Service, including in 2020 when thousands of absentee ballot applications were held at local facilities against USPS policy. When we brought this issue to the attention of the U.S. Postal Service Office of Inspector General, we did not receive a response until nearly 2 years later. And this is not to mention the times that local postal employees in other states discarded mail ballots in the trash, like in Pennsylvania in 2020, or in a ditch, like in Wisconsin in the same year, or simply did not deliver them, like in Kentucky. And to those who would suggest that the solution is merely to bypass the Postal Service and install hundreds of thousands of drop boxes across the state, those are not without their own serious issues as well. Ballot drop boxes have been subject to arson in places like Boston and Los Angeles, making it impossible to know whose ballots were destroyed. Such an event the day before an election would be devastating. This is to say nothing of the ballot chain of custody best practices, which I believe would be violated by widespread use of ballot drop boxes. Furthermore, universal vote by mail does not increase voter turnout as suggested. A study done by the University of California, San Diego and Temple University stated that vote by mail did not increase turnout in presidential and gubernatorial elections. In fact, in mail ballot precincts the researchers looked at, turnout actually decreased by approximately 3% versus non-mail ballot precincts. The same study also found that those who vote by mail are more likely to skip down ballot races than those who vote in person. The study went on to say that according to interviews with California registrars of voters, one of the cons of all mail ballot elections was the potential for fraud. Members, voting in person is the safest way to administer an election, and it's why 93% of our voters choose to do so. I support maintaining our status quo on absentee ballots by allowing those who cannot vote in person to do so, but requiring all others to show up to the polls with their voter photo ID to cast their ballot. Keeping our limited absentee ballot program intact with the precautions we have in place will ensure the integrity of our elections, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? There are no questions. Thank you, Madam. Oh, I'm sorry. It does work. I just, hang on. Let me do. Are you going to be ready?
Yes. This isn't for you, Secretary Landry. I'm sorry for stopping you. But I was reading and listening. The bill, I didn't read about the boxes.
Representative Newell, is this a question for Secretary Landry?
I'm sorry,
Does
that's
she
what
need to be?
I said. She didn't.
It's
you didn't
not.
need
It's
to
not in the
state.
bill. There are some states that do that. It's.
that's
I was
not-
not proposing that.
Okay, because I was listening to what you said and taking account for all of that, but I knew we had discussed in the past about not having boxes, the drop boxes, and I didn't read that in this bill, so I was just making sure I hadn't overlooked anything. Thank you for your statement. Thank you
Thank
for
you, Rep.
answering my
Newell.
question.
All right. There are no other questions. We have from the board is clear. We've got 3 white cards, Nancy Landry, Catherine Newsom, and Sherry Hadsky from the Secretary of State, who have been here for informational purposes, and Secretary Landry to speak. We have 2 red cards, Susie Labrie, who's I'm present and in opposition but do not wish to speak, and Chris Alexander from Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. I am present and in opposition but do not wish to speak. Representative Landry, would you like to close on your bill?
Sure, just a couple things. I've done this twice and had a somewhat related bill one year. It does expand voter participation. I don't know what these studies are. I'm happy to give you everything else I've ever read on this issue. I've seen the numbers and the percentages of how voter absentee voting and whatnot goes up. As far as all the problems that this presents, those are real. We experience those right now, and that's something we have to fix. This would increase the mail ballots by, what do we say, around 50, 60,000 mail ballots. As they testified, that went up $100,000 people after COVID because of the over 65 who have every right to do that. So this is something we need to deal with. As far as fraud, again, we don't have really any evidence of that in the state. We have good elections. Nationally, is there a little more? I don't know, potentially. I'm not really looking at other states. I'm looking at what we do here. Voters do prefer this. I hear it anecdotally, polling on this, while showing up in person is the preferred method for the great majority of people and for those running the elections. Voters want an option, and they don't have to take that option if they don't want to. I vote by person, and I early vote in person. That is my preference, to do that every time. I don't want to, not that there's ever any lines, unfortunately. I wish there were lines when I go to vote. But I think this is not a major issue. It is done everywhere around the country without any major problems. It is something, like I said, administratively that can be addressed, and voters just should be given this option, just like the over 65 are given the option. People with disability, we accommodate them. People who are out of town on vacation, we accommodate them. I think this is something that can be done. And in closing, I would like to, I lost my words, table? Voluntarily defer.
Okay.
God, it's been only 6 or 7 months and I already forgot what to do here. So I would like to voluntarily withdraw,
Okay.
unless anyone
All right. The author
really
has
excited about this.
withdrawn her. Would someone like to make a move to defer? We can just defer it? Okay, Representative, it will be deferred. Thank you.